everyone on Patreon, thank you so much for supporting the Prepared Mind Networks and all that we do. You guys are invaluable to us in a lot of ways. More than just the donation to participate here and to get the premium videos as soon as I make them. You guys have just been absolutely wonderful on all counts, behind the scenes. And, you know, it's interesting, this war that we're fighting, this information war, this war for free speech and free thought. They're doing something really similar to that in Hong Kong. Shit is hitting the fan in Hong Kong, and China has vowed to crush the pro-democracy separatists. Now, what's interesting about China, Hong Kong, and the United States is Hong Kong really isn't part of China proper yet. They're just kind of like provisional governors of Hong Kong, right? But they can exercise military control very quickly. This has a direct parallel in the United States of America, believe it or not. The federal government is kind of, right, the provisional overlord that stays out of everyone's business until things get so bad they declare an emergency, and then they step in and they take care of or deal with or administrate their authority over the problem area. Right? This could be a natural disaster, could be an uprising, right? We've seen this Waco back in, was it 1992, 1991? That was military power being exercised over a very small problem, right? And then they maintained control of that and controlled the media and controlled the narrative. China is doing the same thing with Hong Kong. Right? They are seeing this as an emergency situation, so their role as provisional and quiet overlord is being turned into one that is a little bit more proactive, right? I would say that crushing separatists sounds a lot like the U.S. government when they were crushing separatists in Idaho and in Waco and other places, right? And there have been other places, and it just kept very quiet. China vows to crush pro-democracy separatists. This article is great. It shows a Hong Kong citizen. He's wearing a red hat. It says, "Make Hong Kong great again." Right? Beijing warned that Hong Kong is an inseparable part of China, and any form of secession will be crushed. Right? After demonstrators begged U.S. President Trump to intervene in the ongoing anti-government movement, now in its 14th week. According to China's daily newspaper, and they don't tell us what the name of that is, I don't know, for fear of mispronouncing it or what, but Sunday's rally, last Sunday, proved that foreigners have been behind the protests. That's what the Chinese newspaper says. Foreigners, meaning the United States, and they warn that participants should stop trying the patience of the central government. Now, it's interesting to me that a government would claim that it has patience. Institutions don't have patience. Human beings have patience, or a lack of it, right? What governments have is a need to respond, to bring something under its domain or its control. Bring something under its authoritarian power. Right? Much like Ruby Ridge and Waco, when the United States government said, "Hey, you've gotten too far, you've got away from the rest of the herd, we're going to rein you back in so that we can reign over you," right? It's not that that President Bill Clinton and Attorney General Janet El Reno, it's not that the government lost its patience. Those two, right, and their administrations became impatient, and they decided to take military action. So in Hong Kong, we've got this situation, right? And there's a lot more to this video than just some stupid protesters. I'll get to the big picture shit, as you guys probably surmise. Chinese officials have accused foreign forces of trying to hurt Beijing by creating chaos in Hong Kong over a hugely unpopular extradition bill that would have allowed suspects to be tried in Communist Party-controlled courts. That has been rescinded, but the protesters aren't going away. And you have to ask Why? If that was the problem and it's been solved, why hasn't it gone away? Because 1, you can't trust government. Because 2, politicians lie. And 3, they can introduce it at any time. The legislation's been written. It's just like in our country. As soon as an emergency happens, wham, they've got 5,000 pages of new legislation to solve the problem. So they know that, right? So anger over this bill grew into sometimes violent protests, right? It's one country and two systems formula. The people in Hong Kong don't like it. Okay. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam warned the United States and other countries that it was totally unacceptable for the U.S. or anyone else to intervene in the situation. Totally unacceptable. How about the violation of sovereign authority? Right? This idea that other countries or blocks of countries, coalitions, have any sort of authority falls not under a rule of law, but rather might makes right. And as things get worse, right, we're going to see more intervention. We're going to see more trouble. The Hong Kong government completely disagrees and expresses deep regret that foreign parliaments are interfering in our internal affairs through legislation. We will never allow them to be stakeholders in Hong Kong's internal affairs. Interesting. Democrats and Republicans continue to stand united with the people of Hong Kong in demanding the hopeful, free, and democratic future that is their right, said Nancy Pelosi. Really? She wants them to be, let me get this quote right, hopeful, free, and democratic. How is it in the United States that there is no free and there is no democratic process here? We have a bunch of special interest groups controlling the most liberal, radical Democrats who control the House, and they are doing some wacky things with our culture, with our society, with our laws, with our politics, with our media, etc. So there is no free. So once again, yeah, you know, Nancy Pelosi, what do you expect? Right? On Tuesday, Ms. Lam, the leader of a Hong Kong government, called for the public to stop resorting to violence, saying, quote, escalation and continuation of violence cannot solve the issues faced by our society now. It will only deepen the conflict, contradiction, splits, and even hatred in society. To mend the society and to bring back peace, we are very willing to engage people directly in a dialogue. You know, dialogue never solved anything. When people are completely at polar opposites with each other, no amount of discussion will convince one party or the other to go along, to give up. Right? It's an argument that no one intends to lose, because the people of Hong Kong do not want a communist country to control them and to start with more. Now, what does this have to do with America and shit hitting the fan? Right? Hong Kong is in irreparable condition politically. Socially, it's affecting them economically, as the rest of the world comes down economically. The slowdown is coming. I mean, once again, we've had Chairman Powell come out this week and tell us, well, you know, the rest of the world is having economic troubles, but not the U.S. We're in good shape here compared to everyone else. It's always relative to everyone else. We're doing great. You know, we're up here, they're here, and they're coming down, but so are we. But compared to them, we're doing great as we all come down, right? It's you know, it's ridiculous to always say, oh, the U.S. is the strongest. Yeah, well, you know, the strongest what? The strongest weak country that's about to crash. It's not a good position from which to make continuing efforts to confuse and fool everybody. And it's not a position of strength, it's a position of relative strength. Right? Laws of nature, laws of economics, etc. are going to prove that the system they created is bad. But back to China. China is very much like the U.S. now. It is huge, it is behemoth, it is international, it has imperialistic arms and ties everywhere. It is looking out for its best interest, and it doesn't care about anyone else as long as it's doing well. China is also in big, big trouble. It's in trouble politically. It always is in trouble politically, even though it is a communist totalitarian regime. They have elements of corporatism within it. And from now on, I'll use the term corporatism when referring to how corporations and government cooperate with each other for the benefit of themselves at the expense of the people. So, China is having the same problems we're having. They're coming down and their system's coming down and their people are becoming restless. They're having banking trouble. In our country, there is banking trouble. It's just being well hidden, right? The problems we have, right? We have nothing as far as Nancy Pelosi says, hopeful. You know, we can hope, but is it misplaced hope? Is it a false hope, right? And the reason I bring this up is if you see things getting better, you can hope that they continue even more, right? But when things are coming down and you hope that it stops, well, you hope that it slows down, you hope that it stops, and you hope that it goes up, right? Hope doesn't solve problems. So everything we've seen the government doing, a lot of people refer to as hopium, as kind of a joke about the whole opium, the addiction that it creates, the good feelings of hopium. Right, your people in America are addicted to it, but there's not a lot of what I call hope, which is why I say we need to be preparing. Right, the hopefulness doesn't fix anything. It's just a state of mind. China is saying they're going to crush separatists. This is what governments do. They use overwhelming force to try and fix a problem. Right. Our government is going to do the same thing. It's going to use overwhelming force to try and fix its problems. China crushing separatists means that they're going to sacrifice all else in order to maintain control. The United States, in Europe, everywhere, government always has this desire to use overwhelming force to fix its problems. So in the United States of America, what problem do we have? And what problems can we expect as we slip into this shit hits the fan that's coming? Well, if it's political separatists, they will be crushed militarily. If we have a infrastructure and distribution problem with food and fuel, then you can expect the government at all levels to come in and crush the problem, right? Once again, overwhelming force in order to convince everybody that government's in control and no one needs to compete with them. And if it comes to economic issues, the government will come in and try and crush the problem, right? They're going to crush it with QE. They're going to crush it with rate reductions, right? And this is the Federal Reserve. And if the Federal Reserve doesn't act, right, the president has the authority to act. You can go all the way back to FDR, that great Democrat president of the United States who declared a national emergency. We had a bank holiday. They confiscated people's gold and their holdings where they could, right? They closed the banks. When the banks reopened, people's wealth was revalued, right? In other words, it is an immense amount of power that crushes, absolutely crushes the problem, right? It's overwhelming force to try and maintain control, regain control, and convince people that they are in control. So China is a great example of the attitude that all governments have. And they're doing in China what they have to maintain their control. And Hong Kong is just an interesting, it's incredibly important. And I sympathize with Hong Kong citizens who wish, right, that they could become more free instead of less. But I don't think they realize just how controlled the United States is, right? How the government can do what it wants and the elites are not held accountable. right? In name only, our government is different. In reality, it uses the same techniques and tools needed, right? This ability to use crushing authority and power in an emergency. It's just when there's not an emergency, the governments pull back and appear more benign, right? Giving people a feeling of freedom and the ability to move about and do things and engage in commerce. People need to feel free and they become more productive, and government understands this. But they will maintain their control. In Hong Kong here, these people want Trump, they want the U.S. That is just going to piss off the people in Chinese government, right? The patience that the people who run China, Xi Jinping and then his administration, his Politburo, whatever they want to call themselves, they are going to run short at some point, and they're going to take some stronger action. And that's not going to help U.S.-China relations, which in itself is an effort to maintain supremacy over the situation, except unlike a government down to the citizen, this is government to government, head to head, right? Two major superpowers not happy with what the other one is doing, right? And they can't lose patience with each other because that means war, right? We're talking war, not good. Nobody wants it. I don't. So this is why we've had this standoff for we're coming up on a year with this trade war, tariff war, currency discussion. It's all in play, right? The United States, through President Trump, is claiming that China, we have a trade imbalance with, and it's not fair, that they're taking advantage of our willingness to pay. And then China is saying, hey, we bought all of your treasuries. We, in turn, have supported your country. And that's the exchange we've made. And Trump is saying, let's renegotiate. And China is saying, yeah, we don't think so. And so we've got this trade war going. And the idea behind each government is to use its power and its might to crush the other party. But in this case, they're crushing someone who is just as powerful as they are. Right? It is not, if it was lopsided, one-sided, there would already be concessions, right? If, who do we pick on here? Let's pick on Spain. If Spain said they wanted to engage in a trade war with the United States, Spain isn't large enough to hurt us by refusing to accept our products, and they're not large enough to hurt us by refusing to export us their products. Right? So they would just put themselves at a disadvantage if there was a big relationship there. But with China and the U.S., it's a little different story. And it does have a military, imperialistic, economic, there are impact zones in all of those areas because of Chinese military strength, because of Chinese currency strength, because of Chinese trading strength. Right? This is not going to get better. China doesn't want to give up, right? They are very powerful. They have a lot of pride, and they believe that they are the future of the world superpower. And it's possible that could happen, but they are in big, big trouble. Now, ultimately here, what I see is China and the United States going head to head, and it's going to exacerbate and make shit hits the fan come faster. As preppers, of course, we need food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. We need all of that with our plan, and then understand that all of this tension around the world isn't because of anything other than the systems are coming down. The control mechanisms, the media, the lies, the economies, the military pressure, all of this is causing a collapse in this system. And as a result, we're starting to see, these trade conflicts. This is very cyclical. It's happened before. If you read your history books, you'll see how this works. Right? In other words, it's inevitable, but it's going to exacerbate our problems. On the West Coast, I have a lot of concern about a military invasion by China. It is possible. It's not as likely as a lot of other things, but it is possible. It's going to affect us economically. These tariffs, somebody has to pay for them, right? And the government claiming it's getting all kinds of funds paid into their treasury because of the tariffs. At some point, if it's being paid by China, that'll stop. If it's being paid by the people, it's just pulling money out of our economy. And what I mean by paid for the people is China says we're not reducing our prices, we're going to raise prices to pay the tariff, and then American consumers can pay the difference. You know, this is how these things work, and it takes a long time. The dominoes, even though they're falling, fall very slowly until they fall fast. Right? Until the big news, till the speed up. But that's what I think we're starting to see is an acceleration. An acceleration where it was just a protest in Hong Kong. And then there was a little violence. And then there was some talking. You know, knock it off, bad people. And now China is going to crush. Once again, China's been using much harsher language. As the political leaders, patience wears thin. And they see, the more a government sees they're losing control, it's slipping through their fingers. The more of that they feel or sense that they're losing control of a situation, or that it's gone on too long, the more they will increase that power. The same way the Federal Reserve and the United States Treasury, as the economy slips further and further away from them, the more power they use to bring it back in. Now, last Christmas, December of 2018, we saw a massive, once again, market correction. And from his Mexico vacation at Christmas time, right, the Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, called from his Mexican resort. I don't know how they set this up, but he talked to all the bankers, the big banks, and said, get your asses in there and pour a bunch of money at it. They admitted that it's called the Plunge Protection Team. And they went in and threw a bunch of money, which is direct power, at the problem to stop it. Right? It can only go so far and slip away so far before governments take control back. So we need to be cognizant of that as preppers. How far will it go before we see a massive response from government with regard to the economy, social unrest, right? How far will they let it go? You know, politics and law, how far will it go? Right? How far can the Democrats push all of their bullshit and their screaming? How far can all of these political knotheads and boneheads push their stuff before the government says that's enough? Right? They pushed it really far. Now Antifa is a terror organization. Right? But what did San Francisco do? San Francisco called the National Rifle Association a political action committee, right, that donates to campaigns, that doesn't incite violence and doesn't take violent action. San Francisco's called them a terrorist organization. They're now being sued for it, right? But that's the type of responses we're going to see as people start losing the narrative and losing their power. These people in government will exert big power, right? If the Federal Reserve doesn't act when they should, and there's enough power slipping away from President Trump, he will reach out and grab it. And he can fire Powell for cause. And now he's got what I would call the reasoning. Because ex-Federal Reserve president, I believe of the New York branch, decided to say, oh yeah, we need to do what we can to bring Trump in line. We need to let the economy go so he can be blamed for it to get him out. It's not real smart of that guy to say that, but that was their attempt to let the public know they are in charge. Trump can say, you know what, if that's the attitude there, and that guy said it, but the actions are demonstrating it, he can take control of the Federal Reserve under war powers, emergency war powers. Right? The war powers come into effect in an emergency, so that's why I call them emergency war powers. Because it is, in a way, a war. It's an economic war, it's a social war, it's a political war, it's a military war. China is showing us and giving us a great example of how things can go on until they need to be stopped. And it's showing us the strength of China, or rather the resolve, that this is not a game to them, right? And it's not a game to you and I. Shitting the fan is not a game, right? It's very serious, and we need to be prepared to bunker in, to bug out, to take action, to defend ourselves, right? And that's really, right, if the governments have to reach out and take action to crush the enemies and fix the problem and set things straight, then we as individuals have the same right and responsibility to do the same for ourselves down on our little micro level in our little 10-mile radius world, right? Take it very seriously. Don't dwell on it, right? Don't give yourself depression. Don't go into a tailspin, but take it seriously, right? And once you have a plan, you've got a plan. You don't have to worry about it anymore, right? Once you have preps, you don't have to worry about it anymore. Just do your very best to get prepared, because chance favors the prepared mind is yours. Thank you again, and I'll talk to you very soon. Very soon.